Hello, and welcome to the Project Elected podcast. Project Elect is a nonpartisan nonprofit whose goal is pretty simple. We want to get more Latter-day Saint women involved in public service. On this podcast, we interview amazing Latter-day Saint women who are involved in public service. Hi, my name is Audrey Perry-Martin. I'm the founder of Project Elect and the host of this podcast.
We have a real treat on the podcast today. I'm so excited to introduce Dr. Susan Madsen. She is joining us. She is a professor at Utah State University and one of the foremost experts in the country on women in leadership. So we are really privileged to have her take the time to chat with us today, and I'm so excited to hear about her research.
It's so great to be here. Thanks for the invitation, Audrey. I'm excited about our conversation.
Thank you so much, Susan. So your research has highlighted key barriers that keep women from stepping into leadership roles. Can you tell me a little bit about what led you to start researching this topic and introduce how you got into all of this?
Thank you. So I have been a global scholar and national scholar on women in leadership through the years. And if you look at all the places women can lead, we talk about business settings and being a CEO of a company or nonprofit or leadership in schools, leadership at universities and colleges, and all of those. The one that keeps coming up over and over again that is somewhat of a challenge, honestly, and especially in the state of Utah, we talk about that a lot, but all over, is the representation of women in government. And I actually split up in our reports government from politics. So today we're talking more about the politics. When we refer to government, of course, politics is part of that, right? But in our reports, when we talk about government, we talk about people that work in paid positions for government. I know politicians are paid some, and not enough for many to call it any kind of living. It's more service to the community. But I will tell you that as I've researched about women running for office, challenges, those kinds of things, it is such a unique topic. And when women have a seat at the table in terms of city council or school board or county commissioner or state legislature or executive positions as well, the conversations tend to change. And so that's why decades ago, when I started thinking about it and, hey, do I move into this area? We had to do research and publish it because things are different when you don't have women in our state legislature, let's say, or when you don't have enough. So states that have more women in their state legislatures allocate money differently than states that have not or just very low numbers of things. And as we know from the research, it's that 30% that's the tipping point. So when at least 30% on a board, in a legislature or whatever, it changes. And honestly, we're supposed to be in the United States, what we call in the literature, a representative democracy. And that means that we need more equal numbers, pretty much equal numbers of men and women. We don't need women to take over everything. We need men too. So those are some reasons why I'm passionate, because the decisions made in government do impact organizations, businesses, nonprofits, schools, but they also impact families and individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. You've talked a lot in your writing about the confidence gap between men and women in leadership. What is that, first of all, and what are some specific things that women can do to overcome it?
It's interesting when you talk about the confidence gap, because there's really two big chunks of barriers. And we'll probably get into the second first, but just for an overview for the listeners. One are really those external challenges that come at you, the systems, the culture, the upbringing, all of those things that have to be dealt with too for more women to want to run for office, to step forward and so forth. There's a lot of discrimination, those kinds of things. But you're asking me about something I've always found fascinating, and that is women's own confidence. And so when you go down to understanding how boys and girls are brought up and the socialization that happens, that's very different. Even if we're aware of these things, parents and elementary school teachers and people in church and everybody, we give boys different messages than girls. And in church, just the assignments like boys set up chairs and girls do this and that, right? All of those things send messages. And so when you get into the global research around confidence and upbringing, this is not just a Utah issue or whatever, it's every place. Boys are still looked at and men as leaders much more than girls and women. And so when we grow up as young women, we're used to seeing more men, and then we don't even envision ourselves. And so we don't have that. And we have confidence issues in terms of there's some interesting genetic things, like girls and boys often are about the same in terms of confidence until they hit puberty. And girls, by the way, it's that puberty age is at 7, 8, 9 in some situations. And there's a divide there. So there's some issues related to some genetics, but much more our socialization, that men should do this and women should do this, that a good Latter-day Saint woman should be like this, and men, and most of those women are more silent behind the scenes, not using their voice as much. And you see that play out, honestly, in terms of who we see in leadership in the church and so forth, that men are the ones that should be making decisions and so forth. So even if we're not saying that to our daughters, those messages just come up in the way that we function in our homes and so forth. So when we talk about confidence, it's interesting because we're socialized in different ways as girls and young women, to be more perfectionistic. So confidence it's different than self-esteem. It's different than self-concept. So confidence can only be strengthened if you act. And we as women don't like failure, even more than men that don't like failure. And so we don't want to act because we don't want to fail. But the research says the only way we can get more confidence is if we act. And that means we have to get more used to failure and be okay. Little things, just let them pass. And so it's fascinating that the more perfectionistic we are, the more we like to get things perfect and right, the less confidence we actually have because we're not doing more things. Isn't that fascinating?
That is fascinating. I didn't realize that you make that connection, that the kind of the perfectionist aspect that women often have, and a lot of women in our church have, is that they want to be perfect. And so they don't act because it's not going to be perfect.
You don't get the confidence.
It's a vicious cycle. Yeah.
And one of the things I always suggest is just get used to failure. Like do little things, like go out and maybe you're an introvert and say, go talk to 3 people at the next party you go to, 3 new people. And if you do that, just give yourself a little pat on the back that you did that. And if one went really awry or 2, just still give yourself a little pat saying, hey, I did that. And good for me. That wasn't perfect, but I'm going to do better next time. So we have to set goals for ourselves to do things. And running for office is a big one. And we have to just get thicker skin and just realize that it's not all about us. And women do this more than men. We make it about us, meaning, if they don't vote for me, they don't like me, or they don't this and that. But as we turn our perspective as women into, and we do better when we do this, into actually my community needs me because I have a way that I do this. I'm willing to lean in. I am willing to use my voice. So I am doing this for my children. I am doing this for people around me. When you feel that quote mark call to lean in wherever it is, it actually let that call come to you. Pray about it, wrestle with it. And I get that call a lot in different spaces to use my voice. And I will tell you, when you feel those promptings come and give in to that call, you can have lots of guidance that come, and you can do things that seemed like they were scary a month ago because you feel that call. And we have to have more women in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints explore their callings with an S. Mothering is one. And what other callings do we have? And we have to have more women of integrity, ethics, honesty, compassion, kindness, dignity. I could go on and on with that list. You're agreeing.
They're so needed. It's so obvious that those are skills and traits that are needed in politics right now.
Even more this year than ever before.
And if we hide away and don't run for office, then we're not using those talents to help the world, and it's a tragedy. And I also like how you said earlier, women who are serving are also helping their families. And I think tying that into the fact that a lot of Latter-day Saint women, that's their top priority, and explaining to them that these leadership roles are actually leading your family, your community, your school, and it's not about you, it's about service, and making that connection for them, because I feel like that's really missing in the way a lot of us think about running for office.
Yeah, I wrote a piece and published it maybe 3 years ago in the BYU Studies Quarterly, I think it's called. And it was called, and you can link to it, Rise and Run, Latter-day Saint Women and Good Government. And it was really focused on the running for office and that part of the government as well. And I really went through and found quotes from conference talks and then went through the handbook. And they don't say, nothing really says this is for men only. It just doesn't say that. We have to have, and you've heard that in firesides from the leaders of the church. And when I say that, I'm talking about the apostles and the prophet and our women's organization. They're leaders of the church too, in the Relay Society on Young Women. But more and more, when you look at President Kimball and President Hinckley and some quotes on the women of the church that will be the women making the impact on good, righteous things in various ways, I haven't seen that play out very strongly yet. But we need a force of women in this church who understand how important home and family is, but also how important it is to protect that and to protect society by engaging in roles that often are not comfortable and that often have not been seen with very many women who are members of the church. We have to rise that number to be able to protect home and family. We did not have much support in the Utah legislature for helping victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, of doing any prevention of those things. And that's because we don't have more committed women who understand how important reducing violence is right now to God, to our heavenly parents. And I know, I'm off a little bit. I'm getting teary-eyed already. We have to have our violence rates reduced around the country here in the state of Utah, and we have to have a force moving forward. That's not okay. Our violence rates are not okay with our heavenly parents.
Yeah. And having women in there, you're absolutely right. It would make a difference. They have such a different perspective, and it's so needed. And the confidence gap and the perfectionism holding women back, it's tragic to me because I see these women, I know these women, and I know what they're capable of. You can see them leading in other ways, and it's clear they would be incredible public leaders. But whether it's confidence...
But it's harder. Can I just say, I mean, I think after this last after what's going on right now in our national government and in Utah's, I know this is broader than Utah, but in Utah's legislative session and so forth, there's some discouragement. And there's a next level of kind of meanness and lack of dignity and things that women really want. We want things better. We don't want to be bullying. We don't want to treat people bad. And so I really fear that even less women will think that they should step forward because they don't want to be in that environment. But I will say this, that this is the time more than ever before to lean in and try to change that. And we can't do that unless we have more women who prepare themselves if they're not, and not overly prepare, right? Just understand what's going on in government and what things need to be changed and how we can use our voice. We can't make this state and this country and this world a better place unless we have more equal numbers of men and women sitting at the table, making the decisions. And that means leaning in to run for office and encouraging other women to do the same, tapping them on the shoulder and say, hey, you're so good at understanding the issues or speaking about these things or whatever. When we tap and we give money, that's something I do. Give $100 even, or $20, whatever, to a woman that is so nervous about running, giving that money and offering to hold an event or whatever it might be. Those little things make a huge difference for women.
We do have a confidence gap, but I think we're also really good at building each other's confidence. And we need to lean into that. We need to really be like, okay, who of my friends is incredible at this and could do this and could run for this, and tell them constantly. Tell people, tell women constantly that they should run, because the confidence gap is real and we have to find ways to overcome it. And I think supporting each other is one of the best ways to do that.
And one more layer of that. What we know from the research is that just saying, you're great, you should do this, often doesn't do the job for men or women. More specific feedback, more specific things. Telling a woman, you gave a talk in church or you taught this lesson, you're so good at listening, you're so good at facilitation, I've seen you do this and this, the issues, you're interested in what's going on in your community. When we give specific things, especially to women, then they start thinking in their minds, I can do this. Okay, I'm good at this. I can listen. Listening is huge. It's a huge skill. And introverts can be great leaders, right? And great in public office. But women give specific feedback. My youngest son, who's almost 30, he came for the first time to hear me speak. I've spoken hundreds of times. On Saturday, my husband did too, and they don't usually come, but it was interesting. I was at the Mind the Gap Music Festival and did the final thing. And my son called me after and gave me like 8 things, very specific things that he liked, from what I was wearing to how I was moving around in my speech to how I took political issues and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was a good example of how we specifically can help women know what we see in them that could then link to public office. Yes, there is a confidence issue that we wrestle with. But I'll tell you, practice, moving out there, doing it. If you're uncomfortable, like self-promotion's a rough thing on women. Can I just say that? And the research, I know the research around this, and men are not socialized to have any issues with self-promoting. So they self-promote. Although in the church, we hear a lot of I forget what we call the language, like this humility kind of thing around when they're talking about what they're doing well. But women, there's evidence that when we self-promote, it goes against most what we've been taught, and it actually causes stress on us in unique ways. And then when we self-promote, it actually breaks social norms. So people may think, why? She's really talking about herself. So they wouldn't do that with the men. So what the research actually tells us is the best thing is when women, or men for that matter, but when women promote each other, then the woman doesn't feel the health stress issues, and she's not breaking social norms. Isn't that interesting?
That is fascinating. I've got 3 basically teenage girls right now in my house. They used to be fine at self-promoting, and now you just see those years, it gets beaten out of them. And it's really sad to watch as a mom, but I love that there's a solution to that women can promote each other and get around that.
There are amazing women leaders in politics that are changing things. There's some women in politics that are not great. Let me just put all of that. But most, men too, right?
Yep,
good
absolutely.
and bad. But when we know someone that is kind, compassionate, has dignity, is willing to lean in, and interestingly, you might find this interesting, but I've written about this, but when we raise our girls to do things like sports, especially team competitive sports, and things like speech and debate, I've done lots of research through the years, they're typically the ones more comfortable because we're used to losing. So we lose, yes, and we go on and we stand up and we rally in speech and debate, even though it's one-on-one and we're speaking. We don't win everything for the most part, and we have this team who's supporting us, and then we get coaching. Okay, here's what I want you to do better the next time. In the past, I've done books and research where most of the women through the decades that have run for especially high-level office have been athletes or been in speech and debate or just had that experience of learning how to lose, and you're okay. And it's not about you and we don't like you. In politics, sometimes we get that though, because women are picked on. The earrings, we say, the hair. So we have to just get used to. And I've had to do that through the years. I have 6 brothers, so I got lots of criticism on that through the years.
And so many times when you run for office the first time, you're going to lose the first time.
Yeah.
And that's actually a great learning experience. Yeah. And I've talked to so many women just on this podcast who ran the first time and lost and then ran again and won. But it's the getting up and saying, okay, I'm going to change what I was doing. I'm going to modify these things. I'm going to learn from it and move on. And running for office in and of itself gets your name out there. You meet new people. It's not a real loss. It's actually a win overall so many times.
It is interesting. We've had really some high-profile women that have lost. And it's interesting that a lot of them have different great opportunities, even if they didn't win. Their name is out there. They are asked to do other kinds of things, especially if they have really good campaigns. Respectable campaigns, and don't dive into the criticism and some of the more masculine areas of campaigning where you try and attack your opponent and those kinds of things. That doesn't work as well for women, but there's this place of respect that you just keep going and doing those things. And I think with women in the church, we need to, and this is tricky, and men too, we need to stay in a Christ-like zone. Think about all the scriptures: charity, meekness, and humility is one. However, women often view humility differently than men. And we often think about humility being small. If I'm really humble, I wouldn't self-promote. I wouldn't try and get attention to myself. But humility is really just being teachable. It's not being small. And so you can be humble. Think about leaders of the church. You can be humble and be visible. You can be humble and do all of those things that are expected for you serving in our state legislature or on a city council. You can do all of those at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. I like Humility is being teachable. And also your phrase, stay in a Christ-like zone in politics. I think that's a great way of saying it because that makes such a difference. You know exactly what that means and what that doesn't mean. And politics often is not in that zone or even anywhere close to it. And if we can keep it there and rise above it and rise above that negative and the attacks and all of that nastiness, I think it would make a huge difference.
It is very interesting to watch what happens to people when they get, quote marks, power. Because not often, but sometimes, and you do see this with women and men, that when you get to that arrogant place where you have power, often you try to bully, and I've heard of that happening in our own state. You might bully or treat people with disrespect and then go to church on Sunday. And that's not Christ-like behavior. And so sometimes when you get, and men get into the zone more because it happens when you get your testosterone higher and higher, that your vision becomes more narrow and you get more competitive and you do things that maybe you wouldn't. But you see this with some women as well when they don't treat other people around. I love the great examples in our state legislature of people that can work in that beautiful space, which is tough, but also can listen and treat people with respect at the same time and make sure what they're saying is based on fact and not try to move things around on things that are just not right. So I love that. I've seen awesome examples, and I've seen some that are not awesome examples, that are not even good examples, that are really scary.
I want to circle back about the women helping each other and promoting each other. And I know you've done some research about mentorship and what role it plays in helping women step into leadership positions, especially political office. What have you found in that research, and how do we promote more mentorship among women in this area?
I love that. And we have some really good in my state, but we need it every place, of women who have run for office that support other women. And when women care about lifting and supporting each other, you tend to get more mentors. And there's mentoring, there's coaching, there's advising, there's various words, and they mean different things. A lot of times people get nervous who are busy with the mentoring. But I'll tell you, I have done coaching where it's just one time, half hour, and it unleashes things in someone. And they're like, I can do this. I can. And so all of those mentoring where you have a longer term relationship, it takes more time, that's great. But even coaching, even moments matter. You can have transformational moments. Yeah, a lot of people, I think there's 1,000 people around the world that call me their mentor, but mostly I've done little bits of coaching. And I've had people do that for me too. So how can we do that better? We can, first of all, as women, care about lifting other women and not believe that somehow if other women run for office, that takes from us. We can lift and be lifted. And then just even moments, like I said, or mentorships or coaching moments that say, hey, here are a few tips for you. That tap on the shoulder, you run, that's powerful. All of those things matter. But spending some time, and in other states they have this too, but in Utah, we have Utah Women Run. We have other groups like Women's Leadership Institute that have women supporting other women. So there's opportunities there to do that. So just we need to see ourselves as not feel burdened down. I don't have time to take on a bunch of mentors, but just in those moments, make sure, send an email of encouragement, send a tip here and there. Answer questions. Just say, hey, if you ever have questions, send me an email. Do something. Those pieces matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen that kind of thing make a huge impact for women. So I want to talk a little bit too, before we run out of time, about the Utah Women in Leadership Project and Boulder Way Forward and all the amazing things you're doing with those organizations and what you hope to see accomplished in the next few years through those initiatives.
Thank you for asking. So, the Utah Women in Leadership Project, I started 16 years ago, and it was supposed to be a 1-year project. And I started it with the foundation, which it continues, of research. So we do research, we get that out there. It's 16 years in, like I said. And then we do creation of resources that are research-based. And then we host gatherings and just inform, but all with this research-based. It's not just opinions flying around. It's all informed by good research. And so we've been publishing and doing all these things for years. But really, I felt absolutely called by God 2 years ago. As I was wrestling with, do I want to keep doing the things that I'm doing? Because the needle's not moving in a lot of areas, and hardly any area, with getting violence rates down, with getting opportunities up, with workplace environment, whatever it might be, all of those areas that we do research with. So I really sought some inspiration and got pure revelation from on high. By the time I landed from a flight, let me just say, I had pages in my journal. I had the name, A Bolder Way Forward. I had pieces, and then I wrestled for another month. There's about a month, and then made it more formal that we were going to move forward with a movement that's 7 years. So the rate we're going, it'll be 3 to 4 decades without any big, even with interventions. If before even seen small notable progress. And for me, that's not good enough for my granddaughters and my daughter, right? We've got to get violence rates down, opportunities up, stronger families, better healthy relationships so women can thrive in their homes, do all of these different things. And so really launched this systems thinking movement in June of 2023. And so this June 6th, it'll be 2 years, and it's a 7-year project really focused on ensuring that more girls and women and their families thrive in the state of Utah. And so not just working on one thing. We have 18 spokes, they're called, and they're anchored by government and business and nonprofit organizations. For instance, Intermountain Healthcare and University of Utah Health anchor our health across a lifespan. People in domestic violence zone are running that one. It's not starting from scratch. It's bringing together all the partners and the people passionate about seeing whatever area of these 18 areas. We now have county coalitions set up in all 29 counties in the state of Utah that are working on that. We have spokes and working groups within there. And then we have 12 impact teams that are, one is race ethnicity, one is veterans, one is refugees, one is LGBTQ, one is women's history, how that can be helpful, and others. I know I missed out. Male allies is another one to integrate with the spokes. So it's a bit of a complex model. We have, but we're not just going to choose one, like the pay gap, to move. We have to do all of this together. And so across the movement now, after a year and a half or more, we have about 275 leaders. And we think we have between about over 4,000 to 5,000 people engaged. And we'll be finishing year 2. But that needs to increase to really make sure if we're going to get our child sexual abuse, 1 in 7 kids, even more girls of those kids, boys too, are sexually abused. That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. But to get that down, we need to have messages, support every home. So we're talking counties, state, then counties, then cities, then congregations, businesses, neighborhoods, homes, individuals. So this is no small thing. And I will tell you, and I'm so glad you're doing this in the context of the Latter-day Saint religion, but I believe with all my heart in personal revelation as a woman. I believe that the most important relationship I have on this earth and in the foreafter is with my heavenly parents and their son. I believe that connection, as we practice and figure out how to receive revelation in the way that works with our head, heart, and hands. And then we rely and trust on that revelation that brings the power of the gospel of Jesus Christ with us as we move forward. And I absolutely would not be doing such a big movement if I didn't feel that this was right for our state. And so I just really encourage women to understand our own gifts and talents and our purpose and our callings, and then take that and don't sit there and wait for certain kinds of revelation. Just put your foot out in front of the one foot in front of the next, move, and that revelation, those tender mercies of helping us see where we're at and feeling that revelation will occur. It will if we do our part, and then just expect. I expect it pretty much every day, I'll tell you. And I trust when I have certain thoughts that if they're good, if the fruit is good, that is revelation. For women, in terms of running for office, serving in office, we have in our gospel, in our church, this wonderful blessing of constant having the Holy Ghost with us. If we constantly, nobody else has that. That is unique to us. And it is time right now to be utilizing that. For our children, there's so much crap going on with children and teens and influences and everything around us.
A perfect invitation to leave on that personal revelation is so real, and it's so important, and we're so blessed to know about it and be able to recognize it in our church and use that. That's the best tool you have, and pray about it and listen when you get the answers and be led to where you should go.
I think today we're going to be led more and more to do things that are outside our comfort zone. Maybe not all of us, but many of us, to run for office, and all of us to support great women and men who are in office, to have them feel of our support and to be there and to help as we need to. We can make an influence. We just can. Every single person can influence in their homes, and not or. This either or is very dangerous for this. It may not be my season. I have issues with that, although it's true in some ways. It's and. We can do a bit of this and that and do other things.
And step outside our comfort zone at the same time.
But even the and could be, maybe you just had a baby, right? And you really have all these toddlers at home. The and could be looking at that woman across the road and just talking to her when you're out in the yard. And you say, you are connected to the community. You care deeply about the community. You care about the school system. There's going to be an opening for the school board or the city council. And think about that, because I see you, and I see you in that role.
Yeah. And I like your point about seasons, because I feel like that does sometimes get used as an excuse. But I will say there's always something you can do. I have 3 members of my Project Elect board this year who had babies and who have toddlers. One of them had twins. They're still doing things, small things. They do what they can. And I think there's always a little time if you feel called, and you can make a little time. And if you make it a priority, there's always something you can do, which can prepare you later. And maybe when you don't have toddlers and babies to actually run as opposed to being more supportive. Susan, this has been delightful. I have pages of notes. I'm going to go through all of them. I've got so many great ideas. I appreciate you so much coming on and taking the time. I feel like I could talk to you for hours, but we'll leave it at this. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Great to chat today.
You too.
Thank you all for listening to the Project Elected podcast. For free resources and materials, head over to projectelectwomen.org. We're also on Instagram and Facebook as Project Elect Women. We'd love for you to subscribe, rate us, or give us a review on iTunes. So until next time, thank you.